Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. Welcome to the Sierra Song Zentangle inspired class. I'm getting ready to teach this class for the Napa Public Library, and I wanted to jump on here and share it with you as well. So let's talk about the things that we're going to need for class today. I'm going to be working with my Pigma pen, but you can also work with your Micron PN pen or your favorite Tangle pen. I'll be working with the Identi Pen, which is a thick nib pen, and this is great for pooling your ink into the spaces of the border. Now, you could also use a thicker nib pen like a Sharpie, or you could use a thicker Micron. Whatever your favorite puddle pen is, go ahead and grab it, but I'll be working with the Identi Pen. I also have the Jelly Roll 10 in my hand. This is a white gel pen. You could also use the Signo white or any other white gel pen that you like. Even a Posca pen will do. I will also be working with the Prismacolor pencil. You know me, I am a Prismacolor girl, but you can use whatever color pencils you like for this and just play along. I will also be working with a graphite pencil and a blending stump. If you don't have a blending stump, you can always use a Q-tip in lieu of a blending stump, and it works just fine. I'm going to be tangling on a tile that is 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. It's super smooth paper like a cardstock or a Bristol paper, but you can also use your sketchbook and play along with us as well. You just want to make sure that that paper is nice and smooth. It just makes for a better coloring experience and tangle experience. With that said, let's get started with the Sierra song. Okay, so hopefully you have all of your materials put off to the side here. And many of you know that I love to do a little bit of a centering exercise before we get started with creating, but I wanted to say a couple of things first before we get centered. You're going to hear me refer off and on to these two characters that we have in the center as either geese or swans. And technically they're different animals. But I've just started birding, so I'm learning all of this, and they are in the same biological family, but they are different. So you'll hear me interchange it. Sorry for all of my birders out there if you're a stickler about this, but I am going to be interchanging it throughout the video. All right, here we go. So let's go ahead and take a comfortable seated position here and let your feet touch down onto the floor. You can let your hands rest in your lap, letting your shoulders melt away from your ears, and let your spine grow comfortably tall here. And if you feel okay with it, allow your eyes to close for a moment. And just letting your attention come to your breath here, and just noticing how the breath is today. Perhaps it's long and full, or maybe it's short and jagged. So just noticing, but not judging. And then in your own timing here, let's go ahead and start to deepen in the breath here by breathing in through the nose and gently exhaling through the mouth. Let's breathe in for the count of 4. And then exhaling to the count of 6. Breathing in to the count of 4. And exhaling to the count of 6. And one more time in for the count of 4. And exhaling to the count of 6. And then in your own timing here, just letting your breath return to its natural pace and noticing if it's a little bit fuller, a little bit easier. And as we sit here and breathe for a moment, I'm going to share one of my favorite poems of all time, and this is by Mary Oliver, and it's called Wild Geese. And she says, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for hundreds of miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things." And just letting that resonate with you for a moment. And in your own timing, wiggling in your fingertips and wiggling in your toes, gently blinking your eyes open if you had them closed. And let's get ready to create. All right, so we are going to build a string today, and you can see that I've got my graphite pencil in my hand here. I'm going to come away from the corner here about an inch, and I'm just going to make a little dot to guide myself, and I'll do the same thing on the other side, so just coming away from the corner about an inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop down and start to make a column. And you can see I've got a little wiggle and wobble in my line today. And that's just fine. And that's pretty much going to be what we're going to work with here. Now I am going to go into where the column is, and I'm going to make a very narrow aura right next to that first line that I had. Now for me, drawing vertically is a lot easier than drawing horizontally, but you may feel otherwise. And if you do, go ahead and just do it your way. And then once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up my pen and I'm going to ink in my lines. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why don't you use a ruler? And really for me, it's really about this looking like it's handmade. I'm not interested in it being totally perfect. And then I'll go over to the other side and I'll do the same thing. You can see that I'm just letting my hand rest on the page as I make my way down. So I'm going to turn this horizontally now, and I'm going to start to build my string across here. And so what this is going to look like is I'm going to pick back up my graphite pencil, and I'm going to come to where I think the middle is and make a little dot, and I'm going to divide the upper space. Now once I've got these two rectangles in here, I'm going to go to the middle of the rectangle, and I'm going to make a dividing line. And then I'll go over to this rectangle and make a dividing line. And you can see that this gives me little squares that are going to go across the top. Now I'm going to use these as guides, and I'm going to let it come down and help me divide the spaces that I have below. And then I will let this particular line right in the middle drop down so that we get a nice 2 square area. Now, I am going to pick up my pen and start to work. However, I am not going to use pen in the middle here. I'm going to leave that alone. Eventually that line will disappear. So I'm going to come in with my pen, divide the space. And you can see some of my squares are better than another. That's okay. And then I'll do the same thing over here. And this is going to be our string for today. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to work with our first tangle. So our first tangle today is called Tansy, and this is by Deborah Figg. And you can see that I've created a little square here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create a plus sign right in the center here. And then once I have that, the actual, how shall we say this, our fragment for today is going to look a little something like this. You're going to divide the space in half, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to create a nice aura, and then another aura right out here. Now once we have that, I'm going to go into the interior. I'm going to make a line that comes up and out, and then I'm going to make kind of this curvy triangle here, and I'm going to pull the ink into that area, and you can see that is the fragment of the tangle. Now I'm going to flip-flop that fragment around so that it looks a little something like this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an aura that goes around, and then I'm going to go up, create that nice triangular shape that has kind of a roundedness to it. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, creating almost a diamond-like shape. Well, not almost, it is a diamond-like shape. And then I'll go ahead and I will aura into this area right over here, this area right over here. And then once again, those lines are coming out, and you can see that they're rounded on the edges. And you can see that there's this mono tangle that's happening in the center that looks a little bit like a four-leaf clover. You might be able to see it a little bit more strongly once I get these auraed in a little bit better, or rather pooled in a little bit better. And so that is tansy, and we're going to put tansy into our piece. Okay, so I have my composition here, and I'm just going to start up in this corner, and I'm going to go ahead and make my plus sign inside of the square that I have here. And then once I have that, I'm going to start to build the diamond. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that. So I'm going to go ahead and build the diamond. And just like I did the first time, all I'm going to do is I'm going to create an aura in the corner. I'm going to do that on each one of these. Same thing over here. And then the same thing over in here. Once I have that, I'm going to extend out from the center and touch the middle of each of those lines, and then I'm going to round off, creating these little triangles that is going to help me develop that really nice clover shape in the center here. You can see that I've developed that really nice clover shape. So I'm going to do that in all of the boxes that I have, and I'm even going to do them down here. And then when we come back, we're going to do some pooling of ink. Okay, so we're going to take a thicker pen to work with here. This is the Identi Pen. I love this pen, and you can see that it's got a nice thick nib, and it's great for pooling ink. You can see that I have these little interstices in here that I want to fill up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to pool my ink into the spaces in between, and this is going to give this a really nice graphic feel. You can see that I'm being pretty thoughtful around where that pen is going so that I don't get into the tangle itself. And I'll work into the corner here. You can already see that that's really bringing this up off the page. So go ahead and fill in your interstices. I'll go ahead and do one more for you to see. And you can see how I'm making pretty quick business of this with a thicker pen. Now remember, if you don't have an Identi pen, you can use a Sharpie in lieu of it. You can use a thicker Micron, or you can just use your regular pen. It'll just take you a little bit longer to do, but it's kind of a meditation for me whenever I'm pooling ink. I get so much satisfaction out of it, just watching that ink fill in the space and just really bring the tangle to life. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to bring our main characters into the piece. Isn't that such a pretty pattern? It's so pretty. I can't wait to shade it with you. So I've picked back up my graphite pencil here. We're going to be bringing in our main characters, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit behind these main characters. So I live in a place where there's a pond very close to our house, and we have Canadian geese that come down, and right now we've got a mating pair that have been just making themselves known in the area, and so this is dedicated to them. And my husband and I, we've named them Aria and Augie, and so this is for Aria and Augie. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating kind of an open-ended heart. And you can see that I have my line that's right down the center there. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come down from the top about an inch, and I'm going to start to make this open-ended heart. So it's going to look a little something like this. So it's not coming back to the center point, it's coming and flaring out just a little bit. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go from this point and start to come outward at a little bit of a diagonal angle. And then I'm going to start to aura this line. So you're going to see me come out, round off just a little bit. And then I'm going to stop before I get to the bottom. And you can see I've got about 3/4 of an inch before I get to the bottom there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to come out at a diagonal angle, round off the edge, and I'm going to stop before I get to the bottom here. You can see I'm leaving an open space. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to the top here, and I'm going to just start at the top, and then I'm going to aura this line that's right in front of it, and then when I get close to the bottom I'm going to flare out, and then I'm going to round off and rejoin. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to start up at the top, auraing this line right here, flaring out just a little bit, and then I'm going to round off and rejoin. Once I have that, I'm going to come back to the top, and I'm going to create an arched line that's going to come out towards the edge here. And just before it gets to the edge, I'm going to let it arch, and then I'm going to have it touch the line. I'm going to go over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to arc out, let it round off before I get to the edge, and touch down. So now I have these two shapes that are facing in towards each other. Now, to create this kind of soft wing that we're going to get here, I'm going to go ahead and just let this be my starting off point, and then I'm going to make a soft curved line that comes down. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to use this as a jumping off point, and then right about midpoint, I'm going to round off. And then finally, to create their beaks, let's go ahead and zoom in on this. All I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the top, make a little puzzle piece, and come back out. See how that kind of looks like a little puzzle piece with this little arched edge? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that, come down, in, and out. Now once I have that, I'm going to build a nice triangle shape that is going to come up almost to the top of the head and let it drop down. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. And when we go ahead and ink this in, it's really going to give this a dramatic feel. So you can see that I've got my two swans in there, and I'm going to pick up my pen now and I'm going to ink them in. So same way that I started out before, all I'm doing is creating this very kind of wide heart that has a flared edge at the bottom. Same thing on the other side. And it flares out at the bottom. Then remember that diagonal line that's coming up and out, and then we round off the top, coming back, and then we pause before we get to the bottom. Same thing over here, flaring out, and then we pause before we get to the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come back to the top. I'm going to use this as a starting off point. I'm just auraing this front line right here. Once I get down towards the bottom, see how it flares away from this one? And coming back and in. Same thing on the opposite side. Coming out, and then letting it come back in. Once we have that, we'll come up to the top and create an arched line. And we're going to let it just drop down and let it touch that line. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and use this as my jumping off point, and then I'm going to round off, and then I'll do the same thing over here. Finally, I'm going to come back in, create their beaks just by doing a line with a rounded insert and then straight out again. Let's get in there really close so that you can see it. So all it is a line, an arch, and a line. Now once I have that, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to make a nice triangle that's going to come in, and the same thing over here towards the top of the head. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pool my ink into the area. Same thing over here. Just pooling my ink. And then once I've got that the way that I want it, I'm going to be bringing in their eyes. And this is a really quick way to bring in the eyes here. And that is, I'm going to pick up my Jelly Roll 10, and all I'm going to do is a little dot to create the eyes. So I'll do one eye there and one eye there so that when I zoom out, they look like they're facing in towards one another. Isn't that so fun? Well, I hope that you enjoyed making these. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start to work inside of these, but we're going to use wallpaper to do that. So go ahead, finish up your swans, and then when we come back, we're going to add some tangles in. So our next tangle is called Aaliyah, And I love this tangle. It's such a beautiful tangle, and we're going to be using it for the wing inside of our swan here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by creating a heart-like shape that's going to touch the edges here. And then inside of the heart, I'm going to create kind of an aura that's going to touch down, and the same thing on this side. So all I'm doing is just a little curved shape, just like so. Now once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do an arch that goes above it with an aura. And then I'm going to create this very soft, I guess you could call it a leaf-like shape. So what this is going to look like is it's going to come up and over and around, so it'll look a little something like this. We're going to go up, over, and around, and then I'll do another one that's right next to it. And you'll notice I'm leaving a little bit of space between me and the edge. Same thing over here and coming down, and you'll notice that each of these is getting a little bit smaller as I come down. Once I have that, I'm going to build a leaf-like shape that goes around it, so it's going to look a little something like this. And then you would pull the edges around the area in here. So I'm just doing this kind of roughly so that you can see what I'm up to. Okay, now you can go ahead and you can bring little flicks into your leaf-like shape just like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into our swan here. And so let's go ahead and bring the swan back in. And I'm going to do this with a color. We're going to be using a little bit of our color pencils before we actually begin to tangle our piece. So I have picked up a little bit of my light aqua, which is PC 992, and then I'm also going to be working with a little bit of the peacock blue, which is PC 1027. Now if you don't have these two colors, don't worry about it, just pick up a light blue and a dark blue and you'll be just fine. Okay, so the way that I'm going to start this piece is I'm going to come in right in this area right here, and you can see that I've got the light blue in my hand, and you can see that I've got this line. I'm going to go ahead and continue that line, but just with the light blue. And so all I'm going to do is make it look like almost a leaf-like shape. Can you see how that looks like a leaf-like shape in there? So once I have that, I'm going to take the light blue and I'm going to fill in that leaf-like shape. Now I'm going very, very lightly with that pencil, and you can see that I'm rubbing the side of the pencil into the page here, going very, very lightly. Once I have that the way that I want it, I'm going to switch into the darker color. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just the way that we talked about earlier with the heart-like shape. So I'm going to find that kind of mid-section here, and I'm going to make a little point. I'm going to use that as my starting, and I'm just going to jump off the side right here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this a little bit of an aura on the inside and let it touch, and then I'm going to go over to the opposite side and do the same. And I'm just going to follow this line all the way down. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a nice arch on the top with a nice aura over the top of it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build that flower-like shape that's going to land right here. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and start to build those smaller shapes into the piece. And it really gives this beautiful detail on the side. I'm going to go ahead and bring some flicks into this, and you can see that my pencil is a little bit dull, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sharpen it up really quickly just to give that little point. And then I'll come back in again and I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now if you want to, you can do more than one in each of these, and you could even add in a little bit of a dot just to give it a little bit of interest. And then I'm going to start to shade a little bit in here. So I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to go very, very softly with that darker blue, and you're going to see me leave a little light source inside here. I'm also going to come in right where we have these indentations, and I'm going to start to bring in a little bit of that color in here. Now I'm not pressing hard, I'm actually going quite light with it because that dark blue is already going to set in pretty quickly. I'm going to take a little bit more of that light blue and I'm going to start to dust in the edges, or do what we call a perimeter shade. Now I am going to let that get a little bit heavier around the inside here, and I'll let it go over to the other side as well. I'm going to also bring in just a little bit of shading right in around those petals, creating a little bit of a shadow here. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of that light aqua, and I'm going to start to blur my edges here. So you can see I've got my light aqua in my hand here, and I'm going to start to blur out those edges just by doing little circles. I'm going to do some little circles up into the petals, leaving a little bit of light right up at the top. And then I'll come in again, leaving a little bit of light right around the edge here. And you can see that that creates this beautiful wing on the side of my swan here. Isn't that so pretty? I just love the way that that looks. It really gives it a nice soft feel. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to do some shading up into the neck of our swan. Let's continue to do a little bit of shading here. You can see that I've had a chance to do the other side as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that light blue, and I can see that I've got a little bit of pencil in here, so I'm just going to take that out. I'm going to take that light blue and I'm just going to do little circles, bringing a little bit of a shadow along the neck here. And this is going to give this a little bit of dimension. You can see that I'm just following this all the way up as I get close to where the head is. and just kind of lightening my touch as I move further away from where the contour of the neck is. And then I'll go ahead and I'll pick up a little bit of that darker blue, and once again bringing in a little bit of shadow right along the neckline. Really just developing that kind of soft shadow. You're going to see me pick up a little bit of that lighter blue and blur off the edge just a little bit. You can see that I'm lightening my touch as I move away. And you could always pick up a little bit of white if you wanted to and just give this a little bit of a blur so that it really had a nice blend to it. It's very, very soft, which I love. And this is PC938. This is the white that comes with your Prismacolor set. And for me, I just love the soft blend that you get on that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side and get a soft blend over here. And then when we come back, we're going to drop in on either side and bring in a little bit of detail into the top feathers of the swan. So I'm going to bring a little bit more detailing into this part of the piece here, and I'm going to focus in on the tail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using this line as an aura line here. So you can see that I've got my darker blue in my hands here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from this point, and I'm going to just go ahead and divide the space in half. I'm going to go ahead again and divide the space again over here, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide the space over here again. And there's a beautiful tangle called Mirth that I love, and it's basically where you take the edges and you just add a little bit of a triangle at the bottom, and that's going to seem a little familiar to you because that's exactly what you did up here when we were working with the tangle of tansy here. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just add a little bit of a triangle that rounds off the edge, and it leaves these really beautiful geometric shapes on top of that wing. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. All I'm doing is dropping down, dividing the space in half, and then going again, dropping in half, and then last one right here, dropping in and in half. And then once again, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to round off those edges, creating that really nice triangle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the top and bring a little bit of interest into the top. I'm going to come in with just a little bit of that darker blue right up at the point. I'll give this a little bit of pressure here. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that lighter blue, and I'm going to start right in where that lighter version of the darker blue was, and then I'm going to let it come down about through the halfway point. You can see that I'm using little circles. And then I'm going to start to lighten up my touch just a little bit so that when I start to get down towards the bottom of where the tail is here, it's going to actually go white. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. All I'm doing is picking this up, This is the darker blue first on this one. I'm going pretty lightly with it. Then I'm going to press a little harder into the point. I'm going to pick up that light blue. This is the light aqua. And I'm just going over where the lightest part of the dark blue was, rolling right over the top of it with little circles. And then I'm going to let it dive down. As I get further away from the top, I'm lightening up my touch. And then once I get down towards the bottom, I'm hardly touching the paper at all, so that we get these two beautiful swans in the center of our piece here. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to introduce a new color into the piece. Okay, so we're going to start to let go of the blues, and we're going to start to bring in a little bit of yellow. So you can see here I've got yellowed orange, which is PC 1002, and I also have in my hand a little bit of orange, which I believe is PC 918. Now, if you don't have the same colors as me, don't worry about it. Just grab a yellow and an orange and you'll be just fine. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the yellow first, and all I'm going to do is just bring a little hint of yellow in right at the base of the neck of our swan. You can see that I'm really trying to give this kind of a watercolor feel. So I'm just very softly bringing in a little bit of that yellow right behind the blue here, just to give this a little bit of interest. I'm also going to bring it in right in here, just before where the white is. I'm just giving it a soft dusting of that yellow. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, just a bit, very, very lightly. And then I'll do just a bit of it right in over here. Now, if you'd like, you can add just a little bit into where we've got some of those petals. You can see that I'm lightly just dusting in a little bit of that yellow into those petals, just to give it a little bit of interest. And then I'll do just a little bit of the center of the heart. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that orange, and I'm just going to come in and put it into where their beaks are meeting, just like so. And I really think that when you bring in the orange into their faces, they really come to life. So go ahead, do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to add in just one more element before we start working in these upper border areas. So I'm going to add one more tangle into the mix here. And this is called Five Petals, and this is by Alice Hendon, and it's a really beautiful tangle. And she starts out by doing these beautiful little orbs in the center of her piece here. So I'm just going to add some orbs in as a cluster. And then what she does is she starts by creating these 5 petals. And then in between her petals, she does these auras. And then she brings in this beautiful detailing where she does some lines with some smaller orbs in the center. And it's such a fun tangle to work with. It just makes me feel happy. It's just a really happy little tangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to bring this into our piece, but we're only going to use part of the 5 petals, and I'll show you what I mean. Now remember, if you don't have room for this, you don't have to add it into your piece. You can just leave it open, or you can choose something else to go into your corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn my piece so that my birds are actually facing upside down. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this corner right in here, and I'm going to start with 3 orbs. And then I'll pull in those little interstices here. And then I'm going to start with a main petal, letting it come in nice and close to my bird there. And then I'm going to do half a petal here, and then I'm going to do half a petal here. Once I have that, I'm going to do an aura here and an aura there, one here and one here. I'll come down the center, creating a nice long line, and then I'm just going to do one on either side. You can add one in here and one in here. I'm going to go over to the other side and do this, but let me show you what this looks like now. You can see that it's over in the corner, just adding a little bit of interest. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this, adding 3, 1, 2, 3 orbs, and a nice petal coming in nice and close to the bird. I'll do a half a petal here, and I'll do half a petal here, creating a nice aura. And then I'll go ahead and create a long stem and an orb on the end of each of these stems. These are a little bit smaller. And then when I come back in, you can see that it creates this really beautiful, soft flower-like feel. Okay, so go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to add a little color into those. So I'm going to take the yellows that we were working with earlier, the yellow and the orange, and I'm going to start to bring them into this corner right here. I'm going to start by bringing in a little bit of that yellow first, and you can see that I'm just going to let it dance around those little orbs. So I'm not going to put any color into those little orbs. I'm just keeping this yellow on the petal. Now you'll notice that on the auras I'm not bringing in any color either. I'm actually going to be using graphite inside of those auras, and that's going to give this a very dramatic feel. I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. Just like so. Once I have that, I'm going to take a little bit of the orange, and I'm just going to bring the orange in towards the center here. Just getting a nice shadow inside of the flower here. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. You can pick up a little bit of white if you like, and just start to blur these two into each other, just getting a really nice blend. I'm going to do the same thing over here as well. Now you heard me talking about using my graphite pencil, and for me what I love to see is a little bit of graphite next to some color. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of graphite and bringing it in towards the center, And then I'll pick up my tortillon and I'll just give it a soft blur. You'll notice that I'm leaving the edges white, and that's going to give this a really nice highlight. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, just a little bit of graphite in here. And then I'm going to come in with the tortillon or the blending stump, and you can see that when I zoom out, it just frames those corners in such a nice way. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to add in a new color to the piece. So I've picked up my gummy eraser. Some of you have heard me talk about working with a kneaded eraser, and I love these because they don't leave any debris on your piece of paper when you're working with it. So you can see that I just took out that center line here that was part of our string, and I'm going to pick up one of my favorite colors in the Prismacolor set. This is grass green, and it is such a beautiful deep green. So if you have a nice bluish green in your set, if you don't have the grass green, which is PC 909, go ahead and grab that. Now I am going to go ahead and start to do some shading with this, and you can see that I'm pretty far back on the pencil, and I'm going to just lay the pencil down on the paper and do a very, very soft rub against the paper with that pencil. I am hardly touching the page. I want you to keep it really nice and light here. So part of the reason why I'm starting with the darker color is because I'm really just looking for a beautiful dramatic background for these beautiful swans that we have here. And right now up here in Lake Tahoe, everything is very green. The snow is just melting off, and so we're kind of in just like pre-spring. And so the whole world up here is just a beautiful shade of deep green. So you can see that I'm kind of dusting that into the areas around my swans here. I'm dipping into those little teardrop shapes, and then I'm going to start to work inside the outer edges. I'm going to turn the tile here. I'm just working my way around their heads. And just working my way around. Turning the tile to make this work. And working my way all the way through. Now once I've got that really nice foundation of green in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work around the perimeter here just a little bit. So you're going to see me come in and add a little bit of a shadow up top. And I would say that I'm using a medium pressure. And what this is going to do is it's going to create almost a halo-like effect all the way around the swans here. I'm going to turn the tile and start to work around the flowers again. And I'm going to let it drop down the sides of where our swans are. And just turning the tile, making it work. I'm going to turn the tile again and start to bring in a little bit of green in between them. And I'm going to let this get a little bit higher up, and you can see that as I'm working, I'm letting this get a little bit lighter as I work my way up, lightening my touch, giving this a little bit of drama at the bottom. And you can see that just by giving a little bit of a perimeter shade around this, it's starting to bring in a little bit more focus into the center. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that yellow that we were working with in here, and I'm going to start to let a little bit of yellow make its way into the center. Just a little bit of softness in here. You can pick up a little bit of your white if you like, and just start to blur out some of that color. You can see that just by using a little bit of that white, it starts to make the color between these two swans have a little bit of intensity. It's starting to get a really nice glow. And I might even add in a little bit of a shadow at the very bottom in here where we have this kind of indentation between the wing and the neck. And just give this a little bit more of a press as we get towards the bottom. I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Just giving it a little bit of softness. I just really love them. There's just something very special about these two geese. They just make me really happy. And just getting into the other side here. And Arya and Augie are starting to really pop forward as we add a little bit more intensity in that color. So when we come back, we're going to start to add a little bit of wallpaper in the background in between these two and start to really bring a little texture in here. So I'm going to pick back up that dark green again, and we're going to start to bring in a little bit of printemps in this. And printemps is just spirals here. And so I'm just going to start by making sure that my pencil has a nice fine point here. And we're going to use the wallpaper technique where you are tangling with the color that you're coloring with. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring in my first spiral, and I always do large spirals first, and you can see how slow I go with my spirals. You know, printemps is one of those tangles that will really give you away if you're rushing. Your printemps can be a really elegant tangle if you go nice and slow. I'm just coming in with a little bit of wallpaper in here. This one's going to be a little bit smaller. Let's go ahead and zoom in on these so you can really see them. And then I'm going to do another one. So if you lose the point on your pencil, you can always resharpen it up. I would say I'm giving this a medium pressure. And then I'll come in And I'll do a small one right next to it. So what I love about this is that, as we've worked in the background, we've developed this kind of nice soft shade that's behind this, and this is going to pick up on that by just bringing in all these different spirals. So you'll see some yellow in them, you'll see some dark green in them. I just really enjoy working with wallpaper. There's just something very, very special about it. So you can see that I'm going to start to bring in a smaller one. Remember, you always want to vary up the size of your spirals because it just makes for more interesting composition. So you can see that all I'm doing is just making different sizes and just letting them touch. And what I love about working with wallpaper is that it can take something that was a little bit benign and really make it special. It brings such a lovely texture into that background, and also brings an elegance into it that may not have been there before. Now, as I zoom out, you're going to see that I'm going to start to bring wallpaper in the in-between where the wing and the neck of the swans are. And you're going to see me vary up the size of those in there as well. So go ahead and play. Bring wallpaper into your piece. You can even start to bring it up and around in the background in here. And just make it yours. Remember, you're the artist. I'm just taking you for the ride, okay? So have fun with this and really enjoy. Let's return back to our first tangle that we did in here, tansy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that very same color that we were working with in the background, and I'm going to start to bring it in up here. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And we're going to work on the right side of tansy all the way around. So what it's going to look like is we're going to start with a little bit of that green and just very lightly dust in a little bit of that green. You'll notice I'm leaving a little lightness out here. I'm going to turn the tile and just work on the right side of each of those petals there. I'm going to continue to turn. And continue. Now, once I've got that light dusting of green in there, I'm going to go right back in where the black line is and add a little bit of pressure onto that pencil. Now, once I've got that the way that I want it, I'm going to pick up some of that light aqua again and just dust a little bit in behind the green. Notice that I'm still leaving some of that white in there. And then I'm going to come back and pick up some of that yellow that we used down in here, and I'm going to go over to the opposite side. I'm going to go all the way out till just hitting the edge and leaving some white in there. And then finally, I'm going to pick up some of that orange that we put in their beaks as well and just run it along that black line again. I'm giving this a medium pressure. I would say this is probably a little bit more like maybe a medium to hard pressure. And you can see that that starts to really glow in there. And I'll work back and forth with the colors and just start to play. I really love to see a little bit of a stronger contrast in here. So I'm going to get just a little bit more of that green going. But that's basically how we're going to work with the inside of Tansy. So go ahead and work with yours. I'm going to work with mine. And then when we come back, we're going to do some shading along the outside and add some more into these little triangular pieces. So have fun with this. Okay, so I had a little recording snafu, so we're back again. All right, so I've picked up my graphite pencil here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and start to add a little bit of shading around the outside edge of Tansy here. Now, once I've had a chance to go all the way around with Tansy, I'm going to bring in my blending stump. Now remember, if you don't have a blending stump, go grab your Q-tip out of the bathroom and it'll work just fine for doing a little bit of blending. And you can see that I've got a little sheen there in the center that I'm trying to develop. Now, if you lose your sheen, don't worry about it. You can use a little bit of eraser and bring it back in. Now, I've also gone into the center with my black pen and added a little bit of a dot to pronounce the flower. I want to say this very clearly so that you know what I'm up to. I would have you wait until you've gone all the way around and done your graphite in all of these pieces so that you don't worry about smearing and smudging. Okay, so you'll go around and do all of your graphite before you come back with your white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just come back into the center and add a little bit of white. And then in these little triangle shapes that we have, I'm going to add 3 little dots. And that's going to bring in just a little bit of a festive feel. Now you don't have to put them in, but I'm going to put them in. But I just wanted to be very clear that you want to make sure that you've done all your graphite before you start in with your gel pen, because the hand has a tendency to smear and smudge, so you just want to be mindful of that. Okay, so have some fun with these, and I'll see you in a minute. Let's add a little bit of blue into our flower up in here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this little guy. And all I'm going to do is just do a little bit of the light aqua on one side just to get a little bit of interest going there. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, just a little light blue. And if you want to come in with a little bit of your darker blue, you can bring in a little bit of dark blue right on the edge just to get a little bit of interest on those. And I think what that does is it ties it in with everything that's happening around it. So you're going to see me just come in over here and add a little bit of that darker blue as well. So now is the time where I would take a moment to look over the piece and see if there's any lines that got lost or anything that I want to clean up. You can see here I have a little bit of a line that kind of got a little messy, so I might clean up here and there and just, make it so that everything has kind of gotten a little once over. And this is the opportunity to also really enjoy what's on your page. You can really see what's happening here, and it's such a fun piece. It just makes me happy to look at it. I'm hoping it's making you happy too. But this is really that moment where you get to look around and clean up your lines a little bit. So here we are. We survived yet another Zentangle adventure together. So I'm gonna just note that I put in my chop. Your chop is just your initial that you put into the piece, and it's usually a time where you've completed your piece and you can offer a little bit of gratitude for the opportunity to create. For me, Zentangle is really a timeout from this wild and zany world that we live in, and I really needed a timeout this time. So I really enjoyed creating this one, and I really hope that you did too. If you enjoyed the class, please give it a thumbs up or leave a nice review in the comments. I always love to see what you guys have to say. And if you enjoyed the class, share the class with a friend. I am always so hopeful that more people will join in to the Zentangle process and try it with color because I get so much joy out of doing it that way as well. And even better, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified every single time I add a class to the channel, and you can try out different techniques in each class. Now, if you'd like to join us on our Facebook page, we have a great Facebook page. It's called the Tangled Yogi Art Community page. And what we do is we have all of our students share their work there. And everybody puts their own spin on this, and we all learn something different from each other. We all inspire each other. And I'm really, really proud of our community. We have such a special group. And I've fallen in love with our community, and I hope you will too. So go over to Facebook and check that out. Well, that's it for me. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi. Thank you so much for joining me for the Sierra song, and I look forward to tangling with you soon. Bye for now.